My mum has a tattoo just like yours." The little girl's voice was barely a squeak over the diner's buzzing neon sign, but to Declan it sounded like a gunshot. He stared at the jagged half-sun ink on his forearm, an original design. There was only one other in the world. The diner smelled of burnt coffee, industrial bleach, and the damp wool of coats that had seen too much rain. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the hour when the world stripped away its polite fictions. Declan sat in a corner booth, the cracked red vinyl sticky against the back of his neck. His hands were wrapped around a ceramic mug that held a lukewarm black sludge. He didn't drink it. He just needed something to hold on to so his hands would stop shaking. He'd spent the last 4 hours in a shipping container near the docks, negotiating with men who spoke only in fractions and blunt force. His knuckles were split, the dried blood flaking like rust against his pale skin. He smelled of cheap motel soap, a pathetic last-ditch effort to scrub the metallic tang of copper and adrenaline off his skin before stepping back into public. He rolled the cuffs of his dark button-down shirt to his elbows. The diner was suffocatingly hot, the heater working in a frantic, rattling overdrive. The movement exposed the heavy cord of muscle in his forearms, and more importantly, the ink. It wasn't a sprawling sleeve or a generic skull meant to intimidate. It was a jagged half-sun, the rays tangled and choked by a dense wrap of barbed wire. It was ugly. It was a scar masquerading as art, etched into his skin 6 years ago in a parlour that reeked of green soap and bad decisions. The diner was mostly empty, an old man hacking wetly into a napkin near the pie case, a trucker snoring softly in the next aisle over, and a few booths down, a mother and her kid. Declan hadn't paid them much mind. He was too busy cataloguing the aches in his ribs and the persistent, high-pitched ringing in his left ear. But then the mother stood up, her back to him, pulling a worn grey cardigan tight around her shoulders. She pointed the kid toward the bathroom down the hall and headed to the register to pay. The kid didn't go to the bathroom. She was maybe 5, small, wearing light-up sneakers that didn't light up anymore, and a pink jacket with a sticky smear of grape jelly down the zipper. She wandered down the aisle, her steps heavy and entirely unbothered by the late-night gloom. She stopped dead at Declan's booth. Declan didn't move. He was used to people averting their eyes, feeling the cold, dense gravity of what he was before he even spoke. He had a face that promised violence, even when at rest, but the kid just stared. Her eyes were a familiar muddy hazel. They locked onto his left arm resting on the Formica table. She reached out with a pudgy, unapologetic finger and pointed directly at his forearm. "My mum has a tattoo just like yours." Declan's breath stopped. It didn't hitch. It just ceased. The ambient noise of the diner, the clinking silverware, the rattling heater, the low hum of the refrigerator dropped out entirely, replaced by the rushing sound of his own pulse. He looked at her tiny, jam-stained finger, then up to her face. "What did you say?" His voice was a rasp, rough as sandpaper. He tried to soften it, tried not to sound like the man who had just shattered a rival's jaw 3 hours prior. The little girl didn't flinch. She leaned closer, smelling of cheap strawberry shampoo and sleep. The sun, with the prickly string. "My mum has it on her shoulder. I trace it when we watch cartoons." Cold sweat prickled at Declan's hairline. The ceramic mug in his hand suddenly felt like a block of ice. It was impossible. The design wasn't flash art off a wall. He had drawn it himself on a grease-stained napkin at 2 a.m. in a cramped apartment that smelled of vanilla and stale cigarette smoke. "Half a sun," she had whispered, her fingers trailing over the crude sketch. "Because we're never entirely out of the dark, are we, Dec?" He swallowed hard. It felt like swallowing glass. "What's your name, kid?" "Chloe. Chloe." The name felt heavy on his tongue. "And your mum? What's her name?" Before she could answer, a voice cut through the diner like a blade. "Chloe!" The pitch was frantic, panic, pure and unfiltered. Declan's head snapped up. Standing by the register, clutching a thin, faux leather wallet, was a woman. Her hair was shorter now, chopped at the jawline, the dark brown strands lacking the gloss they used to have. She looked thinner, exhausted. There were heavy shadows beneath her eyes, and her shoulders were hunched in a posture of perpetual defense. But it was her, Naomi. For 3 seconds, the universe ceased to exist. Declan's eyes locked onto hers across the expanse of dirty linoleum. He saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her pale skin went utterly grey. The wallet slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a dull, pathetic slap. She didn't say his name. She didn't scream. She lunged. Naomi closed the distance in 3 frantic strides, grabbing Chloe's arm with a force that made the little girl stumble. "We're leaving," she hissed, her voice vibrating with a terror so raw it made Declan sick to his stomach. "Naomi!" Declan started to stand. His knees hit the underside of the table, jostling his coffee. It spilled, hot and black, across the table and onto his lap, but he didn't feel it. "Don't," Naomi choked out. She didn't look at his face. She couldn't. She looked at his chest, at his hands, anywhere but his eyes. She hauled Chloe toward the door. The kid started to whine, complaining about her arm, but Naomi ignored her, shoving the heavy glass door open and stumbling out into the damp, freezing night. Declan scrambled out of the booth. His foot caught on the metal leg of the table and he went down hard on one knee. The bruised ribs flared, a blinding spike of agony that forced all the air from his lungs. He cursed, spitting the word out, and forced himself up. He burst through the diner doors just in time to see the red taillights of a beat-up Honda Civic peeling out of the gravel parking lot. The tires spun, spitting loose rocks against the metal siding of the building, before the car fishtailed onto the main drag and vanished into the fog. Declan stood in the freezing drizzle, the cold seeping through his thin shirt. He didn't run after them. He couldn't. He just stood there, the rain mixing with the cold sweat on his face, listening to the fading roar of a dying engine. Chloe, 5 years old. He looked down at his trembling, blood-stained hands. He did the math, and then he threw up in the gravel. The interior of Declan's sedan was pitch black, save for the faint green glow of the dashboard clock. 4:12 a.m. The leather steering wheel was slick with his sweat. He sat in the idling car at the far edge of the diner's lot, the windshield wipers dragging back and forth with a rhythmic, rubbery screech. He was a man who controlled entire blocks of the city. He dictated who moved product, who kept their businesses, and who disappeared into the muddy waters of the river. He was organized. He was ruthless. He didn't do panic. But right now, he felt like his chest had been hollowed out with a rusted spoon. Chloe. The muddy hazel eyes. The stubborn set of her jaw when Naomi pulled her away. His jaw. Declan rested his forehead against the cold steering wheel. The scent of cheap motel soap had faded, replaced by the sharp, undeniable smell of his own fear. 5 years ago, Naomi had vanished. One afternoon, he came back to their shoebox apartment to find it completely empty of her presence. No note, no screaming fight, just the lingering scent of her vanilla perfume and the flower canister tipped over on the counter. Inside that canister, he had hidden a snub-nosed .38, a weapon he had swore to her he didn't own anymore. She had found it, and she had left. He had looked for her. God, he had torn the city apart for 6 months. He had beaten men, bloody demanding answers. But Naomi was a ghost. She had no family, no digital footprint she couldn't erase. Eventually the syndicate required his full attention. The violence swallowed him whole, and he let it, using the blood to drown out the memory of her laugh. Now he knew why she ran so completely. She wasn't just saving herself from the monster he was becoming. She was saving his daughter. Declan reached into his coat pocket with a trembling hand and pulled out a burner phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice. "It's 4 in the morning, Declan," a gravelly voice answered. Vincent, his cleaner, his shadow. "I need a plate run," Declan said. His voice sounded dead, hollowed out. "Beat-up Honda Civic, late 90s model, dark blue or black, partial plate starting with JT4. You get hit? You need me to come down? Just run the goddamn plate, Vince." All right, give me an hour. I need it in 10 minutes, Declan hung up. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat and rubbed a heavy hand over his face. He felt dirty. He felt a sudden, violent revulsion toward his own skin, toward the blood caked under his fingernails. Naomi had seen him. She had looked at him and seen exactly what he was. 40 excruciating minutes later, the burner phone buzzed. Declan snatched it. Got her, Vincent said. The hesitation in his voice was palpable. Registered to a Naomi Hayes. Falsified last name, probably, based on the blank background. Address is out in the sticks. Pine Ridge Apartments, Building 4. Text it to me. December. Who is this? You want me to send a crew? If anyone else looks at this address, Vince, I will cut out your tongue. Forget you ran it. Declan put the car in gear. The drive took 30 minutes. It felt like 30 years. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy, suffocating fog rolling over the suburban streets. Pine Ridge Apartments was a depressing block of beige stucco buildings that looked like they were sinking into the muddy earth. The parking lot was full of potholes and dead weeds. He parked across the street. He turned off the engine. He sat there for a long time, staring at Building 4. It was a miserable place to raise a child. The gutters were hanging off the roof. A rusted-out shopping cart sat in the bushes. Declan had a penthouse downtown. He had silk sheets and quiet, temperature-controlled rooms. He had money sitting in offshore accounts that could buy this entire complex and burn it to the ground for fun. And his daughter was living here. He stepped out the car. The cold air hit him, biting through his shirt. He didn't care. He walked across the cracked asphalt. His heavy boots made too much noise in the quiet morning. He found the stairs, concrete, chipped, smelling strongly of stale beer and dog urine. He walked up to the second floor, door 4B. He stood in the hallway, staring at the cheap hollow core door. There were scratches near the deadbolt. A faded, peeling sticker of a cartoon dog was slapped near the peephole. Inside, he could hear the faint, muffled sound of a television playing. Cartoons. Declan raised his hand to knock. He hesitated. His fist, bruised, scabbed, lethal, hovered an inch from the wood. "What the hell are you doing?" a voice in his head screamed. "You bring death wherever you go. You're going to infect them." He squeezed his eyes shut. The image of the little girl's jam-stained finger pointing at his arm flashed in his mind. "My mum has a tattoo just like yours." He knocked. Not a heavy, authoritative pounding. Just 3 quiet, hesitant taps. The cartoons inside went instantly mute. Declan held his breath. He heard the floorboards creak. Soft, tentative footsteps approaching the door. A shadow blocked the light spilling through the peephole. "Naomi," Declan said. His voice was a pathetic, broken whisper through the cheap wood. "Please." The silence stretched so long Declan thought she might have slipped out a fire escape. Then, the heavy metallic scrape of a deadbolt sliding back, followed by the rattling slide of a chain lock. The door opened exactly 2 inches. The chain pulled taut. Through the crack, Declan saw half of Naomi's face. Her eye was wide, bloodshot, the pupil blown out with terror. She smelled like cheap laundry detergent and old coffee. "Ah, go away," she breathed. It wasn't a demand, it was a plea. "Declan, I swear to God, if you don't walk away right now, I will scream. I will wake the whole building." "I just want to talk," he said, keeping his voice painfully level. He kept his hands at his sides, palms open, visible in the sliver of light. He wanted to show her he wasn't a threat, entirely ignoring the dried blood on his knuckles. "We have nothing to talk about." "She's 5, Naomi." The words tore out of his throat, raw and jagged. "Do the math for me. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll walk down these stairs and you'll never see me again." Naomi's breathing hitched. She stared at him through the gap, her gaze dropping to his hands, to his chest, looking for a weapon. She found only a man falling apart at the seams. "You can't be here," she whispered, a tear finally breaking loose and tracing a pale line down her dusty cheek. "Your world. It bleeds on everything, Deck. I won't let it bleed on her." "I didn't know," he countered, stepping half an inch closer. The toes of his boots nudged the doorframe. "You took my choice. You took my kid." "I saved your kid," Naomi snapped, the anger finally piercing through the fear. "You think I wanted to run? You think I wanted to raise her in a place where the heat gets shut off every other month? I found a gun in the kitchen, Declan, next to the coffee mugs. You came home smelling like copper and bleach, and you looked right through me. You were already dead. I wasn't going to let her grow up watching you become a monster." The words hit him harder than any fist ever had. He flinched, his shoulders curling inward. He wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her he had built an empire, that he was powerful, untouchable. But standing in this dingy hallway, looking at the exhausted woman he loved, he just felt sick. "Let me in," he said softly. "No. Naomi, please, just for 5 minutes. Let me look at her. Let me. Naomi hesitated. She looked back over her shoulder into the apartment. Declan could see the internal war raging in her eyes. The instinct to run versus the crushing exhaustion of hiding. She was so tired. It was carved into the lines around her mouth. Slowly, with a trembling hand, she shut the door to unlatch the chain. The click sounded like a vault opening. The door swung inward. Declan stepped over the threshold. The apartment was tiny, a single room serving as living room, dining room and kitchen. The carpet was worn flat, stained near the radiator, but it was clean. There were crayons organised in a plastic cup on a rickety coffee table, a stack of library books, a worn, faded pink blanket tossed over the back of a thrift store sofa. It was a home, held together by spit and sheer willpower. Chloe was sitting cross-legged on the floor 3 feet from a small square television. She was holding a plastic dinosaur gnawing absent-mindedly on its tail. When Declan walked in, she didn't look scared. She just looked curious. She dropped the dinosaur. "You're the guy from the diner." Declan stopped breathing. He stood frozen in the middle of the room. He felt entirely too large, too dirty for this space. He bumped into a cheap coat rack by the door, making it wobble precariously. He awkwardly caught it, his large hands clumsy. "Yeah," Declan managed to say, his voice cracking. "I'm the guy." Naomi stood by the small kitchen counter, her arms crossed tight over her chest, hugging herself. She looked like a cornered animal. Declan slowly crouched down, ignoring the sharp protest of his bruised ribs. He wanted to be on Chloe's level. He rested his forearms on his knees, exposing the tattoo again. Chloe pointed at it. "Mommy has that." Declan looked up at Naomi. She turned her head away, staring hard at the peeling linoleum floor. "I know," Declan said to the little girl. He looked back at her face. God, she was beautiful. She had Naomi's nose, but the jaw, the eyes, they were his. It was undeniable, biological proof staring back at him in a hand-me-down pajamas. "Do you know my mom?" Chloe asked, tilting her head. "I used to," Declan said, his throat tight. "A long time ago, before you were born." "Oh." Chloe seemed satisfied with that. She picked up her dinosaur again. "My name is Chloe." "I know. My name is Declan." "Declan," she tested the word out. "It sounds like a sharp rock." A choked, bitter laugh escaped him. "Yeah, something like that." He desperately wanted to reach out. He wanted to touch her hair, just to see if it was as soft as it looked. He wanted to pull her into his chest and build a fortress around her, but his hands were stained. Even scrubbed clean, the blood was there. He kept his fists firmly anchored to his own knees. He stood up slowly and turned to Naomi. She was watching him, her guard completely up. "Pack a bag," Declan said quietly. Naomi stiffened. "Excuse me? You're not staying here. This place is a dump. The lock on the door is a joke. Anyone could kick it in." "We've been fine for 5 years, Declan," she hissed, stepping toward him, keeping her voice low so Chloe wouldn't hear the venom. "We don't need your money. We don't need you." "I don't care," Declan said, the old authority, the Mafia boss, bleeding back into his tone despite his efforts to suppress it. "You're not living like this anymore. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere clean. You don't ever have to see me again if you don't want to. But I'm not leaving my daughter in a place where the hallway smells like piss. She is not your daughter, Naomi whispered fiercely, tears springing to her eyes again. Being a sperm donor doesn't make you a father. You chose your family, Declan. You chose the syndicate. You don't get to walk in here 5 years late and play protector. Declan flinched. The words were a knife twisting in his gut. Because she was right. Every single word was the absolute horrific truth. He looked between Naomi's tear-streaked face and Chloe, who was now oblivious, making her plastic dinosaur stomp across a colouring book. I know, Declan said, his voice dropping to a broken whisper. I know I don't deserve it. But I'm here now, and I'm not walking away again. The radiator in the corner of the apartment gave a sudden violent hiss, spitting a bead of rusty water onto the carpet. The sound was deafening in the tiny room. Declan didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on Naomi. She was trembling, a fine, barely perceptible vibration that travelled from her white-knuckled grip on her elbows up to her jaw. She wasn't looking at him like a saviour. She was looking at him like a loaded gun sitting on her coffee table. I'm not playing protector, Naomi, Declan said. The lie tasted like ash, but he forced it out. He needed to de-escalate. The Mafia boss in him wanted to scoop up the kid, grab the woman, and throw them in the armoured sedan downstairs. But the man who had loved her, the man who remembered the exact sound of her laugh before the syndicate hollowed him out, knew that would shatter her completely. Then what are you doing? She whispered. Paying a debt. He reached into his coat. Slowly. 2 fingers only. Naomi flinched anyway. He pulled out a thick banded stack of $100 bills and a black burner phone. He set them gently on the edge of the kitchen counter. There's 10 grand there. Clean. The phone has 1 contact programmed. Me. You don't have to call it. You can take the cash, pack a bag, and disappear again. I won't track you. I swear to God. Naomi stared at the money. It was more cash than she had seen in half a decade. It was enough to fix the car, rent a house in a decent zip code, buy groceries that weren't stamped with clearance stickers. It was dirty money, soaked in the blood of men she didn't want to know about, and it was sitting next to her chipped coffee mugs. Why? She asked, her voice cracking. 'Cause she's eating off the floor in a building that smells like rot, Declan said bluntly. He didn't look at Chloe. He couldn't risk the crack in his chest widening. Because you look like you haven't slept in 5 years. Take the money, Naomi. Run if you have to. But run somewhere better. He turned his back on them. It went against every instinct he had to turn his back in a room where he wasn't in control, but he did it. He put his hand on the cheap brass doorknob. Declan. He paused. He didn't look over his shoulder. She likes to draw, Naomi said softly. The fight had drained out of her, leaving only a hollow exhaustion. She draws suns, all the time. Declan shut his eyes tight. The words were a physical blow to the base of his skull. He opened the door, stepped out into the urine-scented hallway, and let the hollow core wood click shut behind him. He walked down the concrete stairs, his boots heavy. He needed a cigarette. He needed a drink. He needed to rip off his own skin. He hit the heavy metal security door at the bottom of the stairwell and shoved it open. The coastal fog had rolled in thicker now, swallowing the streetlights and turning the parking lot into a grey, soup-like void. The cold air bit at the sweat drying on the back of his neck. He was halfway to his sedan when he heard it. It wasn't a loud noise. It was the soft, rhythmic crunch of gravel under heavy rubber. A car was rolling into the lot with its headlights off. Declan stopped. The instincts that had kept him alive for 10 years in the city's underbelly flared, drowning out the emotional wreckage of the last hour. He slid silently between a rusted-out minivan and a pickup truck, melting into the shadows. A black SUV idled to a stop near the entrance of Building 4. The engine cut out. Not Vincent. Vincent drove a grey sedan and always signalled his arrival. 2 doors opened, the interior dome light had been removed. A professional touch. 2 men stepped out. They wore heavy dark coats. One of them checked the magazine of a suppressed pistol, the metallic snick echoing faintly in the damp air. Declan's blood turned to ice. The O'Rourkes. He had shattered their lieutenant's jaw at the docks tonight. He had been sloppy leaving. He had sped through the city, desperate to chase a ghost in a diner, and he hadn't cleared his tail. He had led a hit squad straight to Naomi's doorstep. "Building 4, one of the men muttered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp carrying through the fog. "Boss said he pulled up here. Find the car, find the apartment, burn the whole floor if you have to." Panic, pure and blinding, spiked in Declan's chest. It was a new sensation. He had faced down loaded guns before with a bored sigh, but this was different. Chloe was up there. Chloe was sitting on the floor with a plastic dinosaur 50 feet away from men who would put a bullet in her just to make a point. Declan didn't think. He became the monster Naomi had fled. He slipped a 6-inch combat blade from the sheath at the small of his back. He moved around the rear of the minivan, his footsteps making zero sound on the wet asphalt. He didn't have his own gun. He'd left it in the car, trying to be a man he wasn't when he walked upstairs. The first man walked toward the stairwell, his eyes scanning the upper windows. The second man lingered by the SUV, lighting a cigarette. Declan took the smoker first. He closed the distance in 3 explosive, silent strides. He clamped his left hand over the man's mouth, jerking his head back, and drove the blade up under the rib cage with his right. He twisted the handle, severing the diaphragm. The man convulsed, a muted, wet gurgle trapped against Declan's leather glove. Declan held him tight, feeling the violent thrashing fade into a heavy, dead slump. He lowered the body silently to the wet asphalt. The cigarette hit a puddle with a sharp hiss. The first man paused at the bottom of the stairs, turning back at the sound. "Tommy?" he called out softly. Declan stepped out from the fog. He didn't try to hide. The man raised the suppressed pistol, but Declan was already moving. He threw the bloody knife sidearm. It wasn't a clean throw, it caught the man in the shoulder, burying itself deep in his collarbone. The man grunted, his aim jerking wide. A suppressed shot spit into the concrete wall next to Declan's ear, raining brick dust onto his coat. Declan hit him like a freight train. They crashed against the metal security door, the impact rattling the hinges. Declan didn't give him room to breathe. He grabbed the wrist holding the gun, twisting it savagely until the bone snapped with a sickening pop. The man screamed, a high strangled sound, dropping the weapon. Declan brought his knee up, burying it into the man's stomach, then drove his elbow into the bridge of his nose. Cartilage crunched. The man went limp, sliding down the door, leaving a thick smear of crimson on the peeling grey paint. Declan stood over him, breathing heavily. The metallic tang of copper filled his nose. His hands were coated in a fresh, sticky layer of blood. His ribs screamed in protest, but the pain was a distant, irrelevant static. He looked down at the dead man at his feet, then back out at the fog. There could be more. The O'Rourkes wouldn't stop at 2. He looked up at the second-floor window. A faint yellow light spilled out through the cheap, crooked blinds. Door 4B. "I won't let it bleed on her," Naomi had said. But it was already here. The perimeter was breached. The choice to walk away was gone. Declan didn't knock this time. He shoved his shoulder against the hollow wood of 4B. The cheap lock splintered instantly, the door flying open and crashing against the drywall. Naomi shrieked, backing into the kitchen counter, grabbing the closest thing she could find, a rusted bread knife. Chloe dropped her dinosaur, her muddy hazel eyes going wide. Declan stepped into the light. He was a terrifying sight. His dark shirt was torn at the collar. Blood, bright, fresh and undeniable, smeared his cheek and coated his right hand. His chest heaved. He looked exactly like the apex predator he was. "Declan, what did you do?" Naomi screamed, pointing the trembling knife at him. "We are leaving, right now." His voice was a bark, stripping away any pretense of negotiation. "I told you." "They followed me," Declan roared, the sound bouncing off the claustrophobic walls. He saw Chloe flinch, pulling her knees to her chest. He forced his volume down, swallowing the adrenaline. He looked at Naomi, his eyes burning with a desperate, terrifying clarity. "Men from the city, they followed my car. There are 2 bodies downstairs, Naomi. More are coming. Grab her shoes. Now. Naomi's face drained of all colour. The bread knife clattered from her grip, bouncing off the linoleum. The illusion of her safety, the delicate bubble she had spent 5 years blowing, popped in a single second. She didn't argue. She knew his world. She knew what a hit squad meant. She dropped to her knees, grabbing Chloe by the arms. "Come here, baby. We're going for a ride." "I don't have my shoes," Chloe whimpered, her lower lip trembling. She was staring at Declan's bloody hand. Declan stripped his heavy dark wool overcoat off his shoulders. He threw it over the bloodstains on his shirt, hiding the worst of the carnage. He grabbed a damp dish towel from the sink and violently wiped his hands, scrubbing until the skin was raw and red. "Leave the stuff," Declan snapped as Naomi reached for a duffel bag in the corner. "Leave everything. I'll buy you a new life tomorrow. We have to clear the lot." He walked over to Chloe. The little girl shrank back slightly. Declan stopped. He didn't touch her. He looked at Naomi. "Carry her," he said quietly. "Keep her face buried in your shoulder when we go down the stairs." Naomi scooped the heavy 5-year-old up, burying Chloe's face in the crook of her neck. "Close your eyes, Bug. Don't look around." Declan drew the suppressed pistol he had taken from the man downstairs. He checked the chamber. It was a slick mechanical movement that made Naomi sick to her stomach. He stepped out into the hallway, clearing the corners with his eyes, moving with a terrifying practice grace. "Stay behind me. Step where I step," he ordered. They moved down the stairwell. The smell of copper hit them halfway down. Naomi choked on a gasp when she saw the blood smeared on the metal door, but she kept her hand firmly pressed against the back of Chloe's head. Declan kicked the door open. The fog was still thick, masking the bodies. He led them in a wide arc around the dead men, keeping his broad shoulders between Naomi and the carnage. He popped the trunk of the armoured sedan, grabbed the keys and unlocked the passenger doors. "Get in the back, keep her on the floorboards until we hit the highway." Naomi scrambled into the back seat, pulling Chloe down with her. Declan slid into the driver's seat. He didn't bother with the seatbelt. He slammed the car into drive, killed the headlights and hit the gas. The heavy sedan surged forward, eating up the asphalt. They tore out of the Pine Ridge apartments, fishtailing onto the main road before Declan clicked the headlights back on. He pushed the car to 80, weaving through the sparse early morning suburban traffic. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the car was the hum of the tyres and Naomi's ragged, shallow breathing from the back seat. Slowly, the dense fog began to lift, giving way to the cold, bruised purple light of dawn. The city skyline appeared in the distance, a jagged silhouette of glass and steel. Declan checked the rearview mirror. No headlights were tailing them. The perimeter was secure. He let out a long, slow exhale. The adrenaline was draining, leaving behind a deep, bone-crushing ache in his ribs and a hollowness in his chest that felt permanent. "Where are we going?" Naomi asked. Her voice was flat, defeated. "A safe house upstate, not mine. Clean property, heavily wooded, gated. You'll be safe there." "And then what?" Declan looked in the mirror again. Naomi had pulled herself up onto the seat. Chloe was asleep, exhausted by the sudden chaos, her small head resting in Naomi's lap. The little girl's arm was thrown out carelessly, her sleeve pushed up. "And then you stay there," Declan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'll wire an account in your name, enough to cover private security, a tutor, whatever you need. You're not staying." It wasn't a question. Declan gripped the steering wheel. "You were right, Naomi. I bring the plague with me. Tonight proved it. I can't play house. I can't read her bedtime stories and pretend I didn't spend the afternoon breaking men apart." Naomi looked out the window at the passing trees. The anger was gone. There was only a profound, tragic understanding. "You're going to put us in a cage." "I'm putting you in a fortress," Declan corrected softly. "I can't be a father to her, Naomi. I'm too far gone for that. But I can make damn sure nothing in this world ever touches her." He looked at the reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. He looked at Naomi's exhausted, beautiful face. He looked at the sleeping child who shared his blood. And then he looked at his own forearm, resting on the top of the steering wheel, the jagged half-sun, the barbed wire. He couldn't be the light in their lives. He knew that now. The darkness in him was terminal, but as the sedan sped north away from the city, Declan made peace with the only truth he had left. He didn't need to be the sun. He just needed to be the barbed wire that protected it. What did you think of Declan's raw realization? Can a man deeply entrenched in the dark actually protect the light? Or will he only pull Naomi and Chloe down with him? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this intense, grounded dive into a broken Mafia romance, please hit that like button, share with a friend who loves gritty stories, and subscribe to catch more intense dark romance narratives.